Hello and welcome to Elite Wine and Whisky. Previously we've spoken and written about different distilleries and whisky terms while outlining maturation, but today we're going to talk more in depth about casks and barrels, specifically ex-bourbon and ex-sherry, where they come from and what is the difference between the two. Let's dive in first and talk about ex-bourbon barrels, as they make up the majority. By that we mean the vast majority. While whisky is matured in many different types of wood, ex-bourbon make up about 85% of all vessels used for the maturation of whisky. So what is an ex-bourbon barrel? As the name implies, it previously contained bourbon, with the rules and regulations surrounding bourbon stating it must be matured in virgin, charred American oak barrels, that American oak known as Quercus alba to the scientific community. Now, while to be called straight bourbon, the liquid must mature for at least 2 years. To simply be called bourbon, there is no minimum maturation, so liquid can enter the bottle after just a few months or less maturation. What this means is that the bourbon will not have taken too much flavour from the barrels, and after this they can be flat packed and shipped all around the world. Considering the amount of bourbon produced and the quantity of American oak, the barrels are quite cheap and help to form the basis of whisky maturation. So what happens when they reach Scotland? When an ex-bourbon barrel reaches Scotland, it is recoopered and might be toasted, recharred or left as is before new make spirit is filled into the cask. As we've spoken about before, when whisky is maturing, the wood and the liquid both expand and contract, taking in the flavours of the cask and whatever was in there previously. When we're talking about American oak, that gives vanilla, caramel and coconut tastes that are quite fine and mellow. The residual bourbon that may have been retained within the oak staves also moves into the whisky, giving it a sweet hit and helping with that great fruity and vanilla flavour that is present across most whiskies. So what about pricing? Ex-bourbon barrel prices have a wide range dependent upon where the barrel is coming from, for instance if it's from a well-known distillery that uses good oak, and the fill level. If you hear the term first fill ex-bourbon, that means that it is the first time something other than bourbon has been in the barrel, while the term second fill would be the second time something other than bourbon has been used. More often the phrase refill barrel is used, and this can be used multiple times, indicating second fill, third fill or more. The main rule, however, is that the more often and longer a barrel has been used, the cheaper that barrel will be, as the different compounds within the oak are gradually being stripped out to the point that the oak will be inert and won't do much to the whisky at all. This combination of quality and different fill levels mean that ex-bourbon barrels of a first fill nature will be much more expensive than those of refill, but sourcing an ex-bourbon barrel can cost between £100 to £300. Bear in mind that this would be an empty barrel and that a distillery or bottler would source these casks at a lower cost due to the size of their orders, and when filled with whisky, the buyer would pay for that too, with costs starting at £1,000 and heading upwards depending on the distillery you might purchase from. So what about sherry casks? Sherry casks are different. A sherry cask does not have to be oak from any particular country. A sherry is less concerned with the wood reaction and more concerned with the oxidation of a liquid in a breathing vessel. For this reason, you'll find many sherry bodegas that use American oak due to its availability, but you'll also find sherry casks and butts of European oak, Quercus robur. European oak is less porous than its American counterpart and tends to lean less towards vanilla and sugar and more towards spice and dried fruits. This is of course assisted by the sherry that was once in the cask, the sherry being retained within the oak staves and then moving into the whisky, bringing those amazing sherry tones. So while whisky is all about that wood reaction and the maturation, sherry is more about the oxidation. But though we see the same fill levels being used when talking about sherry casks, you'll notice something different about sherry cask whiskies, that they all tend to be more expensive. This is because of the scarcity of sherry casks. While bourbon is produced in force and is a popular drink, sherry has been declining through recent decades. This decline in popularity has seen a decline in production, and sherry casks and butts are getting rarer. For this reason, the price of those casks to distilleries and bottlers has increased heavily in the past few years, with an empty sherry butt costing upwards of $1,000 and more, and a buyer of a sherry cask whiskey can expect to pay that much plus the cost of the whiskey. The taste and the flavour of the whiskey at the end is what matters. Purchasing a whiskey cask either through a distillery or a broker is a great way to show support of your favourite distillery and to get something that is truly unique. As no casks of whiskey are the same, a purchase of a cask of whiskey means you'll have something unlike anything else in the world. Whether it's an ex-bourbon barrel, a sherry cask or more, it's all down to what you drink and enjoy. Slange.